Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ScholarSip, a little different version. So I'm Danuta Nietetsky, Dean of Libraries, and I'm really very pleased to welcome you to a very special 10th anniversary edition of ScholarSip. Before I continue, I want to note that we are recording this session, so I ask everyone in the audience to please stay muted throughout the presentation. A few minutes food for thought here. We have planned time at the end for questions and comments, and I look forward to that being respectful and engaging food for thought discussions ScholarSip is well known for. So due to limitations of time and the Zoom environment, we ask that you write your questions in chat, and our communications manager, Stacy Stanislav, will raise them for a shared exchange at the end of our speaker's presentation. So thanks for that. So it's rather hard to believe that we have been hosting this event series for a decade now. We launched ScholarSip in March of 2012, as part of the library's goal to help build our cross-campus intellectual community through increased connections and awareness of interdisciplinary research at Drexel. While the mission of the event has not changed over the last 10 years, the event itself looks slightly different today. First, we expanded our audience by adding a virtual option, actually well before COVID, and enabled Drexel's remote faculty, staff, and students, as well as also adding alumni and members of the public to attend. Second, a couple years ago, we started planning our yearly events around a common theme, which have focused shared exploration from topics like connecting Drexel to global scholarship to responding to COVID through scientific research. So this year, our 10th anniversary, instead of hosting 3 events, as we normally do, we're hosting 10 food for thought presentations running throughout the year through June 2022. So today's session marks 2 down with 8 more to come. First, our events calendar, or please visit our events calendar for details about upcoming sessions. And we hope to see you again in person whenever possible and virtually via Zoom. And I think at some point, Stacy will pop that up so you'll have the actual site. So today's session also celebrates and honors Black History Month by offering us an opportunity to learn more about the significant contributions of one of Drexel's Black faculty researchers. And now I'm very pleased to give a short introduction to today's thought-provoking speaker, Drexel Professor Ayana Allen-Handy. So Professor Allen-Handy is an associate professor of urban education and School of Education at Drexel University. She is also the founding director of the Justice-Oriented Youth Education Lab, very nicely called the Joy Lab. Grounded in critical race and intersectional theoretical framings, Professor Allen-Handy's work is dedicated to justice-oriented urban education. Through her research, she goes beyond the CR theory's focus on legal analysis and debate surrounding the construct of race and seeks to highlight the human, cultural, and social capital that are often unrecognized and unacknowledged. Utilizing action research methods common to social science inquiries, she strives to support the capacity of students, teachers, schools, and communities to create, implement, and sustain their own solutions to issues that directly impact them through critical youth and community-led participation. So I'm pleased to see that really so many have registered their interest to participate in exploring today's topic. I trust we all look forward to learning more about the challenges to address race in education and to hear how one Drexel researcher is offering evidence-based knowledge to strengthen our shared understanding and individual analytic thinking through the presentation and discussion of research problems and methodologies she's been exploring. So now, before I turn the Zoom controls completely over to Professor Allen-Handy, let us continue our other nice scholarship tradition of raising a virtual toast. I guess mine doesn't look very windish, so you see where I am. Cheers to the most not so new year and to a successful second half of the winter term. Thank you again for participating and joining us, Anya, and over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here today and really excited just to share and to engage in this scholarly discourse today. So the name of my talk is Empowering Youth Through Critical Participatory Action Research. So I wanted to kind of start by anchoring my conversation with my lived experience. And I think it's important for me to really situate my positionality, but also how it's related to my work here at Drexel. Kind of cliche, but I was born and raised here in West Philadelphia. But life's journey and path took me to many other places in the nation and also around the world. And as academics, a lot of times we really find our identity in our academic journeys. And so I kind of have pointed my full circle life experience going off to UNC Chapel Hill as an undergraduate, and then moving to Houston, where I was a first grade teacher and a counselor for many years. And it's important to really share how important teaching was to me and how much of who I am was really shaped in the classroom and shaped and inspired by the many students that I had the privilege of teaching and working with. And then on to Texas A&M for graduate school and to UNC Charlotte for a postdoc fellowship. Never in a million years would I have thought that I would be back in Philly, and particularly working in Drexel, being a youth here in Philly, you know, driving by the Dragon. Drexel was just a part of, you know, everyday life, but nothing that I was really integrated within. And so thinking about how life can really take us on a journey that is unexpected, but also wonderful with surprises along the way. So I wanted to kind of anchor our conversation with this quote that I love from the beautiful and brilliant Toni Morrison. I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. And so I wanted to start with this quote because it really kind of demonstrates the thought behind and kind of the inspiration for the development of the JOY Lab, the Justice-Oriented Youth Education Lab. In the summer of 2019, myself, my graduate assistant, Allie, and two of our community youth researchers from West Philadelphia High School kind of in a way founded the JOY Lab. And it started off with us just hanging out in a shared space. Gratefully, our dean, Penny Hamrick, we moved into a new space at 3401 Market Street. And there was an opportunity for individuals to apply for lab space. And so as we were kind of working through some things that summer, we decided to apply for a lab. And that was kind of the impetus of the JOY Lab. And so our mission really, we are a team of faculty, graduate, undergraduate, youth, and community researchers engaged in research methods and critical civic praxis that's rooted in culturally relevant and culturally sustaining pedagogies, critical race theory, and social justice youth development, with the intent to advance justice in all of its forms, particularly educational, social, and racial justice. And the type of research that we do is really project-based. So we have this project-based approach that includes youth-led and community-led participatory action research. It's a dynamic, co-constructed research process that is designed to interrogate and transform systems and institutions to produce greater distributive justice. And ultimately, in the work of justice, it can be very tiring, kind of that racial battle fatigue that, you know, when you're investigating issues that deeply impact you, even at an interior level, it was important that we really cultivated a space that we could also be in community, be in family, and cultivate joy. So we really do try to have a safe space in the lab that we can cultivate joy amongst our diverse, intergenerational community of scholars in our collective pursuit of justice. So these are the faces of joy. I'm here speaking today, but we are a team, a family of collaborators, colleagues, students across Drexel, and also across our city. And so I couldn't stand up here and so quote unquote kind of take credit for the work, because it really is the work of these amazing, wonderful people that I would call family and I would call friends. And so here are, as you can see, we are a very diverse team of graduate assistants who really support the day-to-day programming. They are, I would say, my right hand. I appreciate my students so much. They do so much work, and really just having that relationship really be the center of the work we do. We have postdoc scholars, star scholars, undergraduate researchers, our community researchers, our partners at West Philadelphia High School, and then the faculty partners across Drexel. and external to Drexel as well. And then we also have staff that that are on our research teams. So as you can see, we are a very diverse group of individuals. So I kind of wanted to give a brief overview of how I got started with this work. As I shared earlier, I was a teacher, and that really was my passion, teaching and teacher education. And once I came to Drexel, the beginning of my research agenda was really focused at kind of teacher empowerment, building kind of critical consciousness in teachers and culturally relevant pedagogies. And then I realized I really missed working with youth. I really missed having those touch points in schools with youth. And so in my first year, I started a program at Science Leadership Academy called the Youth Scholars Program. And really this program was, I didn't have a template or a blueprint for it. And along with my graduate assistant at the time, Shauna, we engaged in this project of building or supporting the development of youth's scholar identities. And so throughout this 2-year project, students worked on research questions that were plaguing them and plaguing their communities. And at the end of our project, the students were able to go to Puerto Rico as featured speakers at the International Conference on Urban Education. And we published a book chapter in the book, Global Perspectives on Issues and Solutions in Urban Education, where all of the students were able to publish their articles in that book. And I'm happy to say all of them have graduated from college now. I'm kind of dating myself, but this is really the impetus for the work of the lab. I wanted to kind of share briefly some of our other projects in the Joy Lab. One of our amazing projects, Black Girls Steaming Through Dance, is an awesome, inspiring project, and also just a collaboration with some of my dearest friends here at Drexel, Raja Shar, Val Eiffel, Michelle Rogers, and our students, Monique Woodard, Kalila Dozier, and Alicia Lipsy, and one of our Drexel alum, Destiny Bug, who is our program director. And with just really generous seed funding from the Excite Center, we were able to launch BGSD in 2017. We're happy to say we are in our 5th year at BGSD. And I'm going to go through a couple projects quickly because I want to kind of really hone in on one that I think really amplifies the work that we do in the Joy Lab. Another project that brings me great joy, no pun intended, is our partnership with the Writers' Room, Anti-Displacement, the Untapped Potential of University Community Cooperative Living. And in this community-led participatory action research project, we are examining the landscape of gentrification and residential displacement in Mantua, and really looking at cooperative living as a potential response to displacement and a response for us to kind of live in community together. This is a project that falls under the umbrella of the Second Story Collective out of Writers' Room, and one of my, I would say, heart projects. One of those things that just really brings meaning to the work. Another great partnership that we have and project in the Joy Lab is Engineering Wins, which is a partnership with Academy of Natural Sciences. And it's really looking at encouraging and supporting the development of cultural relevancy for mentors of girls in the WINS program, a 40-year program at the Academy of Natural Sciences. And this is in partnership with the College of Engineering, as well as the Academy, as well as the Philadelphia Education Fund. And so one of the things that you'll probably pick up throughout my talk is the interdisciplinary nature of the type of work that we do and the collaborations that we have across the university. And so I wanted to that was kind of a snapshot of some of the projects. But I wanted to kind of demonstrate what joy looks like in action by doing more of a case study deep dive into one of our projects. And that project is the West Philadelphia High School Youth Archivist project. In 2018, we started the project, and it was really focusing on preserving the history of West Philadelphia High School for the persistent legacy of the high school. And throughout the rest of my talk, I'm going to share a little bit about this project. So one of the things that I've learned and that I love from our partnership with Writers' Room is their tagline, "We start with story." And I think that saying if we start with story is really where the work of the Justice-Oriented Youth Education Lab begins. But it's not just in the telling of the story. There's also the purpose of counter narratives and counter storying. And counter narratives allow us to amplify the experiences and perspectives of racially and socially marginalized individuals. By telling our stories, we aim to cast doubt on the validity of accepted premises or myths, especially those of the status quo, and to challenge social and racial injustice by listening to and learning from experiences of racism and resistance, family, despair, and hope at the margins of our society. And so I wanted to kind of start off with this quote by Lucille Clifton, a prolific poet, especially in the spirit of celebrating Black History Month. And in her poem, Why Some People Be Mad at Me Sometimes, she says, they ask me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories. And I keep on remembering mine. So I wanted to start with my story, because it's really critical to understand how I have tried really, really intricately, or tried very, very strategically to intricately incorporate my personal and my professional passion in a way that I couldn't separate the two. And so my story actually starts here at 5844 Addison Street in Philadelphia and West Philly. And in the 1950s, my grandmother, Elizabeth, and my grandfather, William, part of the Great Migration, they left South Carolina and settled here in West Philadelphia and raised their 4 kids. And of course, I shared earlier that I went to college in North Carolina, so I left Philly, but so much of who I am was developed in this house and in this home of love. And so when I come to this work and people say, well, why are you how did you come up with these ideas? A lot of it was nurtured internally, nurtured with the love and the inspiration that I received from my family. And here you'll see in my left-hand corner, a picture of my mom. This was her freshman year at SARE, which is a school in West Philly. And then you see me. And you kind of see this, this circle of what my mom would say, the circle of life happening. And so the way that the West Philly Archivist project came about was not me really saying, I have a great idea. It was having conversations with my mom, who's a very active member of the West Philly Alumni Association. And she would just tell me, about like things that were going on with the alumni and, concerns they had about the new school building and, different concerns they had about the old building being transformed and the community change and how gentrification was impacting the community and erasing stories. And I said, well, Mom, let me start I want to come with you, to some of the alumni meetings. I want to learn more. And so in my having the wonderful opportunity to go to the alumni meetings, to see people who knew me from birth on at some of the meetings, it really inspired in me a desire to want to support what was happening at West Philly High now. And so that is me starting with story to kind of tell you a little bit more about the project. So in the vein of talking about counter storying, whenever you may go online, Redfin, Zillow, to look for homes, there's these bubbles that pop up. They're color coded, they're numerical, and they represent the ratings of schools. And so encoded in simple web searches are deeply embedded inequities. And so as you look around kind of West Philadelphia, where Drexel is situated, the schools that, the rankings of the schools, you see some 3s, 2s, 4s, and then we see a green 9 that is Penn Alexander. And so I wanted to start here for us to think about the ways in which stories are kind of told for us and how we can push back against those stories. So specifically, this project is looking at West Philadelphia High School. So I wanted to zoom in a little bit further at West Philly High. So when you go on to West Philly High, you see that it is ranked a number 2. And so the messaging, the hidden messaging in seeing a school ranked a number 2, just think about even in yourself, what are things that you've thought about if you've driven by West Philly High? Or what are some of the stories, some of the narratives that are perpetuated about this school in our community, one of the only high schools in the Promise neighborhood and in the Promise Zone. And so I wanted to kind of start there because the purpose of the project is to push back against those pejorative narratives that try to tell the story without really telling the story. And so we know in the last decade or so that the original West Philadelphia High School was renovated into the West Lofts. Beautiful renovation, really trying to attract kind of the university city folks to come live in this space that meant so much to so many individuals and families in this community. And so this real rupture of the fabric of the community really caused especially Alumni Association to think about the legacy of the school. And so in 2018, myself and then undergraduate Destiny Bug, and I shared about Destiny earlier, she's currently the program director of Black Girls Steaming Through Dance, but Destiny was my undergraduate assistant at the time. And we, along with 7 youth at West Philly High, started the West Philadelphia High School Youth Archivist Project. And so the background and purpose of the project, the purpose of our youth-led PAR project, is to explore and document the rich history of West Philadelphia High School, which has served as a pillar of the Black community since the early 1950s, to illuminate the voices of students, alumni, families, teachers, staff, and administration, so that we can push back against these pejorative narratives about historically, predominantly African-American schools. Another purpose is to build the capacity of youth researchers to engage in scholarly endeavors that integrate new media and digital literacies, and also center their community cultural wealth and culturally sustaining pedagogies, to inspire a new generation of youth scholars dedicated to issues of access, equity, and social justice. And here you'll see a picture of the West Philadelphia High School class of 71. My mom is an alum of 71, she's right there. I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but just a really rich and robust community of alumni at West Philly High. And so our methods are critical youth-led participatory action research. So what is critical YPAR? It is a multidimensional research method with an explicit focus on reducing inequalities and leveraging youth's expertise, serving as a pathway for youth's critical consciousness and civic action. Our project is also a historical ethnography. So our project blends elements of history and ethnography methods to better understand how the past is linked to the present and the future. We collect data through qualitative research approaches, including oral histories, archival document analysis, and artifact preservation. And really this study involves youth-generated and executed problem identification, research plan development, collection and analysis of data, reflection of findings, sharing of results, and taking action to address the problem. Our youth lead the overall research design because they can draw upon their lived experiences and community expertise to create solutions for empowerment and social justice in their own communities. And so I just wanted to share some of kind of the theoretical underpinnings of the work. Community Cultural Wealth by Tara Yoso really explains the ways in which the expansion of what can be considered capital and cultural capital expanded into these 6 pillars of aspirational capital, familial capital, social capital, navigational capital, resistant capital, and linguistic capital. And the theory really helps us to see the ways in which often marginalized communities, there's resources and assets that are embedded in these communities that often get overlooked. And so community cultural wealth helps us to really center those lived experiences of our youth researchers. Another theoretical underpinning of our work is social justice youth development by Sean Gidenwright and Julio Camarota. And it really talks about the development of youth at the level of self-awareness, community awareness, and global awareness. And here's a little bit more about social justice youth development. It promotes the practice of integrating critical consciousness and social action into teaching and learning, supports youth in integrating some of the root causes of social and historical inequities that they may experience in their own lives and communities. Youth can explore their own intersectional identities while developing awareness of their communities, as well as making connections globally. And then this kind of impetus of kind of the outcome of this type of work is for students to really have this global awareness, which is where youth build complete praxis as they gain the capacity to demonstrate connectedness with others, empathy with suffering, and resistance to oppression. And so here's just a couple little things that I wanted to share of just what this really looks like. This is us kind of as a team doing team building, meeting alumni, listening to their stories. We spent a lot of the first year or so really just kind of building our team capacity, building that relationship of trust, particularly, and looking at how we could as a team not just be in a space that we are, just doing research, but also kind of building that familial capital that Yoso talks about. In the summer, we hold internships for students, and this is really another way that we build capacity, especially in a project where there's this kind of skill development, this archival literacy. We went and we visited museums, we had performances, we really tried to engage students in kind of this capacity building and skill development through our summer internships. And so this is one of my favorite kind of pictures of students just going through some of the artifacts in the archives at West Philly High. And so we are divided into 3 research teams. And so the digital media team of students, the artifact preservation, and the oral history team. And so our oral history team, we're developing our interview protocols, collecting in-person and virtual oral histories from our alumni, and then really highlighting those narratives and stories. The archival team and the artifact preservation team is really doing the work of kind of preserving those artifacts. So West Philadelphia High has an amazing collection of artifacts that are kind of hidden from the public, hidden from even the students that go to the school. And they actually, the Alumni Association has done an amazing job of securing yearbooks since every single year of the school, since 1911 up until the present. And so part of what we're doing is digitizing those yearbooks and creating kind of this online museum so that they will be accessible in the future. We also have a website, so our digital media team has been working really diligently on our website and making sure that we can kind of get the word out about our project and what we do. Also, they do a lot of community mapping, the digital team, and really building those skills in students around digital data handling, website design, editing, scans, and marketing. And so one of the things is really that we're really passionate about is making sure that students have opportunities to disseminate their work, right? So in the academy, going to conferences is such a big deal, and being able to present to your peers and talk about your work. And so one of the things that we have really committed to in pre and post COVID is having students, giving students the opportunities to present at conferences. So we have presented at the Pennsylvania chapter of the National Association of Multicultural Education, the Panethnography and Education Conference, the American Education Research Association Conference, and the Columbia University Teachers College Winter Roundtable Conferences. And this past year, we actually published our first peer-reviewed article. As you see here, the entire team were co-authors, co-constructors, co-designers of our quote-unquote academic paper. In the Makerspace Lab, the teacher has, Ms. Walker, our partner, has printed out a kind of like life-size version of our paper, laminated on the wall. So it's something we're really, really proud of. And then also in 2021, we received an award from the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development. We received the 2021 Lindy Award for K-16 Partnerships, which was a really incredible honor that we're very grateful for. And so I wanted to thank you all, and kind of the food for thought, because I realized that this kind of scholarship is kind of leave food for thought. And I wanted to kind of exit the conversation with my source of joy. This is my son, Aiden. And so my work is, again, yes, because of my historical context, it's very important to me, but also for my family legacy and my story. And Aiden is my legacy. And so this is what inspires my work. This quote by Eve Tuck and K. Wayne Yang. There is no future of the field of education without the contributions of people who are doing their work under the rising sign of social justice. So social justice is not the catch-all, it is the all. And I want to close with that because as a Black woman in the academy and here at Drexel, I've sat in faculty meetings where I've heard faculty say, I don't do social justice, as if that someone like me has a choice not to. And so I ask you, what is really motivating the work that you do, whether you're a social scientist, a scientist, or whatever else you may do? But what is it that is motivating you? And what is it that you are anchored to? Thank you.
Well, let us actually unmute and clap or show your responses. And really thank you very much, Ayana, for those quite stimulating food for thought that we will, yes, we can all try to do that. So I'd now like to open, we've got a nice block of time here. We'd like to open to, the event to questions and comments and discussion. So as I mentioned at the start, just for logistics sake here, based on the limitations of Zoom and the like, we ask that you enter your questions in chat, and Stacy will read, select and read them out loud so we can get some conversation going. And as always, ScholarSip is an inclusive learning environment, and we encourage diverse perspectives, so long as they're expressed respectfully and conversations also reflect our civil discourse. So, Stacy, you've got the view on the chat.
Well, so far no questions, but there was a comment about that last slide, and it is, cuteness is simply joyous in this photo. But please, if anybody else has any questions, just send it to me in the chat. And then we have another comment from Karina. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. No question, just an honor to be part of the Joy Lab. I did it. Thank you.
And if the questions are slow in coming, Ayana, there's always that thing that you ask somebody who's on stage. Was there something that you wish somebody would ask you a question so you have an answer ready you'd like to further comment? So if you have one other, by all means, jump in. But I don't know. I think I see people might be trying to type too. So.
Yeah, there is a question that came in. I don't know if you can speak to this, but how in the world did the high school get converted into condos? This sounds so awful. I wonder what were the mechanisms that made that possible?
Wow. Yeah, so it is something that we see in a lot of our communities today. Kind of transformation of historical sites. And one of the things that I don't know the intricacies of what happened with West Philadelphia High School, but the school basically built a brand new building not too far from the original building and sold the building to developers. And there was a lot of kind of community activism around preserving the history of the school. And unfortunately, it did not work. And now the building is high-end apartments that many of the community members are priced out of. So it really is a kind of a symbol of how community change is happening in ways that are not just displacing the physical person, but displacing histories and erasing histories. And part of our project was really to uphold and preserve that history so that the stories and narratives of the community were not lost.
Thank you. Then a few more. You said you have yearbooks dating back to 1911. Are you also doing outreach to earlier alums? My cousin is a grad way back when.
Absolutely. We are really, really excited to have several of the Alumni Association members who date back to the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And we welcome, if you have a cousin, we would love, their information if they're willing, but absolutely, because the story of West Philly High really tells kind of the American story of, how communities have changed and demographics have changed. West Philly was a predominantly Jewish community at one point. And so we see those signs of the community in the yearbooks, in the pictures, and then we can actually see when the demographics start to shift. And so the story is incredibly rich, and we are committed to telling the full story of West Philly High.
Great, thank you. The next one is, how has the greater community responded to your work in West Philly High?
Well, I guess from our own perception, well, we, have been about the work. So a lot of, in terms of sharing it widely, we have not done that so much because we're really thinking about ways in which to do it thoughtfully. So we've applied to several grants, national kind of historic preservation grants, to be able to expand our work, but also to disseminate it in ways that are more accessible. Kind of our end goal, if there could be an end goal in this type of work, would be to create not only a virtual museum, but a museum at the school that really puts the history on display and allows and welcomes the community in to learn more about the history.
Any other questions? And Karina, I see you put an email in the chat. I'm just trying to copy it so I can share it with everybody. It looks like it was a direct message to me. And the internet is not letting me. Here we go. Here's another question while I figure that out. Do you find a connection or correlation between the work by the students and their academic performance?
So we haven't studied that explicitly, but in terms of just from kind of narrative data that we've collected from the students, absolutely. One of our students, Jayana, is still actively involved in our project, even though she's a sophomore at community college. And Jayana has been really inspirational to the entire project, but mostly because she's one of those students that might be coined as a statistic. So Jayana dropped out her senior year, but yet remained committed to the project. And her, again, talking about counter storying and talking to Jayana, she didn't drop out because it was hard. She dropped out because she said, I'm gifted and I'm not getting what I need. And so part of what we've done is brought Jayana in. She still works for the lab, is still quote unquote on the payroll. And just when she talks about what opportunities, like an opportunity like this has done for her, I would say absolutely. But we don't have any kind of empirical data yet on our students.
Thank you. Then a few more. Have your grad assistants done their dissertation on this work?
As of now, no. No. And I've been one of the, and I don't know if Allie's in the room, but one of my students, Allie, who just graduated, who has been a really critical person in our project. She originally thought about it. It was something she was really interested in. And then I said, is this your work? Is this your passion? Or is this mine? And she's like, yeah, it's yours. So I really encouraged her to, go after her own passion, and which she did. But no, not yet in terms of a student taking this on as their own dissertation work.
Now let's see, what are some ways to inspire youth in STEM related activities in high schools?
Wow. So that is a question that we're thinking about in programs like Black Girls Steaming Through Dance, and also Engineering Wins and the Wins program at A&S. And one of the things that we found in Black Girls Steaming Through Dance, so it's a program that's for 7 to 13-year-olds, so we haven't quite crossed into high school. But one of the things we found is that really tapping into their interests and tapping into their cultural wealth. So for instance, in Black Girls Steaming Through Dance, we use dance as the entry point into STEAM learning. And it's intersected with design and intersected with computational learning, and really honing in on their interests and ways of knowing and being. And although we haven't, studied, or our program hasn't really flown into high school just yet, I do, believe that the same things could apply for high school students.
All right, the next question. Can you discuss the rollout of this project? What was it like to pitch this to the staff of West Philly High and also to the students?
Well, so because it really started with relationships, right? And my mom's relationship to the Alumni Association. I didn't come in the space as a Drexel person. I came in as Michelle's daughter. I came in as Elizabeth's granddaughter. And being able to, the treasurer of the Alumni Association was from my mom's class of 71. And so being able to already have bridges that were already built, I didn't have to go in and say, open the doors, let me come in. It kind of happened organically. And so it actually, before I actually could start the project, again, I just spent time getting to know, authentically know the community, authentically knowing the Alumni Association as my mom's daughter. And then those connections became, more official in nature, so to speak, where I got introduced to the principal. I got introduced to a teacher, Miss Walker, who actually, this is really interesting, was at the Excite Center for a high school event. And a Black Girl Singing Through Dance, we were presenting at this event. And I just said to her, I said, oh, you're at West Philly. I would love to, tell you about a project that I'm working on. And she originally said, oh, I'm going to connect you to the history teacher. It'd be perfect for you to work with him. So I thought that was going to kind of be the more official entry point in. And that didn't end up working out. And me and Miss Walker just kind of joined together and, thick as thieves. And really designed the project and the program together. So having that relationship and that partnership with the teacher in the school was really critical to the development of the project. In terms of how we pitched it to the students, two of the main, not main students, but two of the kind of student leaders were at that presentation with Ms. Walker. And so they had already kind of been introduced to some of the work. And then the students went out and recruited their friends. Hey, here's a cool opportunity. You can get an internship at Drexel. You can do all these different, things. And then it kind of, took off and took on a life of its own.
Great. I'm going to skip ahead to a question and I'll come back to the other one that came in first, but it's related. So I thought it made sense to do it now. Being so relationship oriented, do you believe the programs are transportable to other communities by someone with no relationships or connections like you had?
That's an awesome question. And I think I get that question a lot. But I do think it absolutely is. It's in the approach. It is being people first and people centric. And even if you don't have an established relationship, there is a sense of kind of genuineness in developing these projects. All of the projects that we have in the Joy Lab, they didn't start off from an intimate relationship. It started off at, oh, I'm going to go to the Dornsife Center for dinner. And I'm sitting at a table with Rachel Wenrick at Writer's Room and Carol McCullough from Writer's Room, not knowing, and just having, dinner together and saying, hey, what are you doing? What are you working on? Maybe we can partner on some things. And a lot of my projects really started organically from, not necessarily from the position of a relationship, but the relationship was developed in the process. And so I absolutely believe that, anyone, not anyone can do this work, but that if you have the right dispositions, the right intentions, and the way that you think about community building and relationship building, then absolutely, it could be transferable.
Thank you. Then the question I skipped, I'm very sorry. What is the new West Philly High School building like? And what do faculty, students, and the community think about this new space?
So the high school building, it's beautiful. Karina and I were actually there this morning at the project, and the physical building is beautiful. And when you walk in, there's this sense of just community. It's very bright. It's very brilliant. You see, students kind of walking around, and you can actually see that there's been kind of a shift in policy. So previously, when we would go, you'd have to go through metal detectors, which is fine. We still have to do that, but it was much more, it felt much more disciplinary. And now you go in, there's school resource officers, there's music playing at the metal detectors. And, there is a sense of community that I think gets overlooked, or, again, like I talked about, these kind of pejorative ways that we think about communities of color, and we think about high schools and urban schools in general. And so, yeah, it's a very welcoming place. Today, the students were like, hey, next time y'all come, you're going to bring us some chips and, hey, and we want donut, so just having, again, that familial aspect. And I think West Philly High is like that.
But it looks like we've slowed down a little bit with questions. If anybody has anything they want to ask or just comments, anything, please type it into chat. We've got a couple minutes left, it looks like. Here's one. Are there any initiatives or vision of integrating these youth and high schools to have more diverse experiences in collaborating with students from other cultures?
Can you say it one more time, Stacy?
Yeah. Are there any initiatives or do you have a vision of how you could integrate these youths in high schools to have more diverse experiences in collaborating with students from other cultures?
Well, I think absolutely, but I would say that what we witness in our public schools is kind of this resegregation where it's not, innately a part of our school systems that they're diverse. We do have some diverse schools, but we do really see this kind of resurgence of segregated public schools. And so I do think that there should be programs and projects that really try to make those cross-cultural connections and build those bridges. And a project like this really could, in the sharing of, history, realizing we all have a shared history, no matter what, our points of departure are, or our points of coming together, that we do have shared history and a shared experience. And so I do believe that this a project like this has the potential to build those cross-cultural bridges.
Any other questions? Well, while we have a lull, I had a question. Have you looked at other archives in the city to find out if there's content that other groups are collecting that might be relevant to what you're doing, and it might be about the history of the high school and how you can kind of coordinate with or collaborate with those groups? Maybe
Right,
the university archives.
Well, so Drexel University Archives, we did reach out to them when we were applying for a grant for more kind of the technical support of it. And we were able to visit some of the archives at the African American Museum and at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And that was more about kind of the skill development, but not strategically. We haven't really looked into, like Temple has an urban archive. Those are things that we wanted to do, but then COVID hit. And so hopefully we can begin to make those connections across the city.
I don't think any of my colleagues from the archives are here, so I shouldn't volunteer their services, but I bet there's something they could do to help.
Yeah.
Well, let me make a slightly different plug on that because I can't. And that is that, the other aspect of this story is what you started with, and that's you as a Drexel researcher. And so as we build the university archives, the main focus of that too is to capture the stories of what is connected to Drexel, what is related to Drexel. So as you were talking, there's a number of things that are going through my mind in connection with some of the other college and group things. It's not just the helping perhaps with some of the experiences and educational experiences about this kind of research from evidence-based archival work, helping your students, working with you to do that, but also the idea of how we, you were saying you were very proud of your first article, peer-reviewed. How do you disseminate this information? How do you make the archives known? And so part of what we're trying to do too is to do that scaled to all of things that are related to Drexel's research, Drexel generated research. And I think it would be a great, interesting case and project to look at that, where it's also extended that the faculty member is as the PI, but also using and integrating work with students, which is of course a very exciting piece of our legacy and our history in general. So we will talk. we'll see what we can do. Yeah, that'd be great.
Wonderful.
Help disseminate it.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to share is that we recently received a grant through the Age Well Collaboratory, the College of Nursing and Health Professions, to expand our project to more intentionally include alumni. So we are going to be able to bring 5 alumni on as archivists as well, and really integrate them into the Drexel community. And so we're really grateful for that support. from the Age Well Collaboratory to be able to expand this work, because clearly I'm not an expert in archival history, but it's really tapping into the gifts and talents of those around me. So having a grad assistant who had that kind of museum history and archival knowledge really, brought an aspect to the project that I never could. And so thinking about doing this work, and it really is interdisciplinary for a reason, because we don't all have the talents and skills to make certain, to do certain things, but the project being very interdisciplinary, and now having Karina, who is our graduate assistant, who's a former English teacher. So you're talking about being able to instantly make connections with the students and being able to really support their development has been key to the project as well.
The other side of it, in terms of Drexel's network, in CCI, in the College of Computing Informatics, we have actually one of the highest ranking digital library programs right now. You have a very budding group too of archivists and archival program. So you may also find some nice intersections with the technical support that some of those academic programs as colleagues are looking to. And through that route, there's other kind of funding that IMLS and others might find quite interesting. So some interesting things here. Yep. Well, I see are there any other last questions, Stacey?
There's nothing in the chat, and I see we have just a few minutes left.
Right.
So
let me take this time to again, as we all thank, this has been a terrific, we were sort of talking, these are mini scholarships, but it was just as robust and perhaps even more well attended than many of our regular end of quarter ones. So I think at one point I saw we had about 51 in attendance. I'm not sure where we are right now. We originally had over 80 registrants, and then all this is a meltdown. So thank you very much for bringing an attractive topic and offering some really tasty food for thought as we could share thinking about your passion and your interest in research and interdisciplinary work here at Drexel. So thanks again, Ayana, and thank you all for coming.